Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking, by Susan Cain. Picture this: Montgomery, Alabama, December 1st, 1955. Just as evening settles in, a bus pulls up, and a woman in her 40s, dressed simply and practically, climbs aboard. There's something calm about her presence, a quiet dignity that somehow persists even after a full day hunched over an ironing board in a department store basement. Her feet are killing her. Her shoulders throb with exhaustion. She finds a seat in the first row of the section labeled Colored and watches the bus gradually fill with passengers. Then the driver's eyes land on her. He barks an order: "Give up your seat for a white passenger who's just stepped on." The woman speaks one word, just one. It's delivered so quietly, you might almost miss it, yet it carries enough power to spark one of the 20th century's most pivotal civil rights movements. That word? No. The driver threatens arrest. Her response is measured and steady: "You may do that." Her name, of course, was Rosa Parks. When Rosa Parks comes to mind, we often conjure up images of a fierce, commanding presence, someone who could stare down a bus full of hostility without flinching. But here's the fascinating thing: that's not who she was at all. When she died in 2005, the obituaries painted a completely different picture. They described her as soft-spoken, gentle, petite in stature. Words like timid and shy appeared alongside phrases like the courage of a lion. They celebrated her radical humility and quiet fortitude. There's something beautifully contradictory about that, isn't there? How does someone manage to be both shy and courageous, both timid and world-changing? This beautiful paradox sits at the heart of Susan Cain's groundbreaking work, Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. This book didn't just become a bestseller with millions of copies sold. It sparked a worldwide conversation. It gave voice to somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of the population, people who'd rather listen than dominate the conversation, who crave meaningful dialogue over cocktail party chatter. Susan Cain herself is a self-described introvert who spent years as a Wall Street lawyer, constantly feeling the weight of what she calls the Extrovert Ideal, this pervasive notion that the perfect person is outgoing, dominant, and thrives in the spotlight. She couldn't shake this nagging question: why are our schools, workplaces, and entire culture so biased against quiet, thoughtful people? So she dedicated 7 years to finding answers, diving deep into psychology, neuroscience, and conducting countless interviews to uncover the hidden power of quiet individuals. Today I'm going to walk you through the most eye-opening discoveries from her journey. By the time we're done, you'll see that being an introvert isn't some character defect that needs fixing. It's actually a source of tremendous, often overlooked strength. And if you're an extrovert listening to this, you're about to discover how to tap into the amazing potential of the quiet people already in your life. This is an exploration of quiet power, and it begins with understanding the noisy world we've built around ourselves. So here's the million-dollar question: how did we end up living in such a loud world? Why do we feel this constant pressure that says success means being the life of the party, the first to speak up in meetings, the person who's always on? Susan Cain takes us back to early 20th century Missouri, to a skinny, anxious high school kid named Dale. He was the son of a perpetually broke pig farmer, and fear was his constant companion, especially the fear of freezing up when it mattered most. One day, everything changed. He watched a traveling speaker completely captivate an audience with pure charisma. Dale was mesmerized. It hit him like lightning. Confident speaking was a form of power, so he started practicing relentlessly. He threw himself into every speaking contest available, losing again and again at first. But he refused to quit. Slowly but surely, he transformed himself from a nervous farm boy into a campus-speaking champion. That young man's last name? Carnegie. Dale Carnegie. He'd go on to write How to Win Friends and Influence People, one of history's best-selling books, and build an empire teaching people the art of public speaking and self-presentation. But Carnegie's story isn't just about one man's remarkable transformation. It's actually the story of America's transformation. The country was experiencing a seismic shift from what historian Warren Sussman called a culture of character to a culture of personality. In the culture of character that dominated the 1800s, people were judged by their inner qualities. Words like duty, honor, integrity, and morals were the highest compliments you could receive. People lived in small towns where everyone knew everyone else, and your reputation was built slowly, through your private actions over a lifetime. But as the 20th century arrived, everything changed. People flooded from farms into bustling cities. Suddenly, you weren't working alongside lifelong neighbors anymore. You were surrounded by strangers. Making a strong first impression became absolutely critical. The question shifted from, what's this person's character, to, how do they present themselves? The new ideal was bold, entertaining, magnetic. Self-help books that once celebrated Abraham Lincoln's modesty now had titles like Masterful Personality. The buzzwords became things like magnetic, fascinating, stunning, dominant. This was the birth of what Susan Cain calls the Extrovert Ideal. This all-pervasive belief that the ideal person is outgoing, alpha, and comfortable in the spotlight. This ideal is so deeply embedded in our culture today that we barely notice it anymore. It's there in our schools, where desks are arranged in groups for collaborative learning, and teachers often see extroverted students as the ideal. It's in our workplaces, with their open-plan offices and endless team meetings, where people skills reign supreme. It's even baked into our leadership ideals. Think about it for a second. When you picture a leader, what comes to mind? Probably someone charismatic, talkative, assertive. Someone who commands attention when they walk into a room. Harvard Business School, sometimes called the spiritual capital of extroversion, is built entirely on this premise. Their teaching method centers on the idea that leaders must project confidence and make rapid-fire decisions, often with incomplete information. Class participation counts for a huge chunk of your grade, and students who speak frequently and forcefully are seen as natural-born leaders. But here's where Cain drops a fascinating question on us. Is any of this actually true? Does the person who talks the most really have the best ideas? The research says no. Study after study shows there's absolutely zero correlation between being talkative and having good ideas. In group settings, we perceive chatty people as smarter, more attractive, and more leader-like. But it's just that perception, a bias created by the extrovert ideal. Let me tell you about this exercise they run at Harvard Business School called the subarctic survival situation. Students get divided into small groups and told their plane just crashed in the wilderness. They have to rank 15 salvaged items, things like a compass, an axe, a sleeping bag, in order of survival importance. In one group, there was this young guy with extensive backcountry wilderness experience. He actually knew the right answers. But he expressed his views quietly, and the group barely paid attention. Instead, the action plan was driven by whoever spoke loudest and most forcefully. The group completely ignored the ideas that would have actually kept them alive, simply because they were delivered without aggressive confidence. When they watched the video of their discussion afterward, they were mortified. This isn't just some classroom exercise. This happens every single day in boardrooms, classrooms, and governments worldwide. The loudest voices usually win, even when they're far from the wisest. Cain points to management guru Jim Collins, who studied the best-performing companies of the late 20th century. Guess what he found? Their leaders weren't flashy, charismatic figures. They were often quiet, humble, modest, and reserved. Leaders who built up their companies rather than their own egos. So if our world is so hyper-focused on extroversion, what happens to creativity? What happens to the deep, focused work that real innovation requires? This brings us to the story of a young man named Stephen Wozniak. On a rainy March night in 1975, about 30 engineers crammed into a garage in Menlo Park, California. They called themselves the Homebrew Computer Club, with a mission to make computers accessible to ordinary people. Wozniak, a quiet, shy 24-year-old calculator designer, sat in the back, just listening. He was too shy to actually talk to anyone, but he was absolutely thrilled to be around people who shared his passion. That very night he went home and, working completely alone, sketched out his first design for a personal computer. A few months later, he and Steve Jobs co-founded Apple Computer. Wozniak's story perfectly illustrates what Cain calls the myth of collaborative creativity. Today we're drowning in what she calls the new groupthink, this elevation of teamwork above everything else. We've convinced ourselves that innovation springs from gregarious collaboration, from brainstorming sessions and open-plan offices. But Wozniak's story tells a different tale. Yes, the group inspired him, but he created alone. After that first meeting, he didn't huddle with the others to design a computer. He went back to his cubicle at Hewlett-Packard, often arriving at 6:30 in the morning and working late into the night, completely alone. He described this period of solitary focus as the biggest high ever. In his memoir, he gives this advice to aspiring creators: work alone. You're going to be best able to design revolutionary products and features if you're working on your own, not on a committee, not on a team. Science backs him up. Decades of research confirm that group brainstorming simply doesn't work. Individuals brainstorming alone consistently generate more ideas, and better ideas, than groups do. Why? Several reasons. Some people coast and let others do the work. It's called social loafing. There's also production blocking. Only one person can talk at a time, forcing everyone else to sit there passively, often forgetting their own ideas while they wait. But the biggest culprit is what researchers call evaluation apprehension, the fear of looking stupid in front of peers. This fear runs surprisingly deep. Neuroscientists have discovered that when we stand alone against a group, our brains register it as an actual threat. Dissent triggers a fear response in the amygdala, a primitive part of our brain. Peer pressure doesn't just feel uncomfortable, it can literally alter how we perceive reality. Groups, Cain writes, are like mind-altering substances. So where do these fundamental differences between introverts and extroverts even come from? Is it purely cultural, or is there something deeper happening in our biology? Enter the fascinating work of developmental psychologist Jerome Cain. In 1989, Cain brought 500 four-month-old babies into his Harvard lab and exposed them to novel experiences: popping balloons, colorful mobiles, the scent of alcohol on a cotton swab. About 20% of the babies reacted intensely, crying, pumping their arms and legs. Cain labeled this group high reactive. About 40% stayed calm and quiet, the low reactive group. The rest fell somewhere in between. Here's the counterintuitive twist. Cain predicted that the high reactive babies, the ones making all the fuss, would most likely grow into quiet, reserved, introverted teenagers. And he was absolutely right. He followed these children for years, and that's exactly what happened. The high reactive infants developed serious, careful personalities, while the low reactive, placid babies became relaxed, confident extroverts. The key lies in their nervous systems. Those high reactive babies weren't crying because they were future drama queens. They were crying because their nervous systems were more sensitive to novelty. This sensitivity is controlled by the amygdala, the brain's emotional control center. Infants born with especially excitable amygdalas react strongly to anything new or stimulating. This is profound. It tells us that introversion isn't about being antisocial. It's about being more sensitive to stimulation. Introverts feel just right with less stimulation. A quiet conversation with a friend, a good book, a walk in the woods. Extroverts thrive on more stimulation. Parties, meeting new people, high-energy activities. It's not that introverts don't like people. They just prefer less stimulating ways of interacting. This sensitivity has a beautiful upside. Psychologist Elaine Aron has done groundbreaking work on what she calls highly sensitive people. She's found that these individuals, often introverts, tend to be more empathic, more conscientious, more attuned to beauty and subtlety. They process information more deeply. They feel emotions, both positive and negative, with remarkable intensity. This brings to mind Eleanor Roosevelt. She was famously shy, serious-minded, and sensitive. Her own mother nicknamed her Granny for her solemn demeanor. She married Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was her complete opposite, bold, buoyant, irrepressibly social. Their differences caused friction, sure, but they also formed the foundation of one of history's most powerful partnerships. Eleanor's sensitivity gave her a profound conscience. She couldn't look away from suffering. She was the one who opened Franklin's eyes to the desperate conditions of New York City's poor. Throughout his presidency, she served as his conscience, traveling the country and bringing back stories of forgotten people, urging him to act on their behalf. As one civil rights leader put it, Franklin was a politician, but Eleanor spoke out of conscience. Her sensitivity was the wellspring of her incredible strength. This idea of sensitivity as strength is part of what researchers now call the orchid hypothesis. Many children are like dandelions. They can thrive almost anywhere. But others are like orchids. They're more delicate and can wilt easily in harsh conditions. But in the right environment, with proper nurturing and support, they don't just thrive, they become magnificent. These orchid children are often the high-reactive, sensitive introverts. Their sensitivity makes them more vulnerable to adversity, but it also makes them more receptive to love, encouragement, and positive environments. Now, if introverts are more sensitive to stimulation generally, what drives extroverts? Science points to something called reward sensitivity. Extroverts appear more responsive to dopamine, the brain's reward chemical. Their brains have more active reward systems, which get them excited about pursuing goals, whether it's a work promotion, a big stock market win, or just a fun night out. This gives extroverts that energized, enthusiastic feeling, that buzz. It's what drives them to take risks and put themselves out there. This reward sensitivity can be wonderful. It fuels ambition and action. But it has a downside. People who are highly reward sensitive can get so excited by the prospect of a prize that they ignore warning signs. Cain argues this partially explains the 2008 financial crash. Too much power concentrated in the hands of aggressive, risk-taking extroverts high on bull market buzz. They ignored the cautious, introverted analysts who tried warning them of dangers. A perfect counterexample is Warren Buffett. Buffett is a self-described introvert famous for his careful, persistent, prudent thinking. Success in investing doesn't correlate with IQ, he said. Once you have ordinary intelligence, what you need is the temperament to control the urges that get other people into trouble in investing. He has the temperament to ignore the crowd's buzz and listen to his own quiet, inner scorecard. Given all these deep-seated differences, here's an interesting question. Is the extrovert ideal universal, or just a feature of Western culture? Cain takes us to Cupertino, California, a town with a large Asian American population where cultural norms look very different. Here, being studious, quiet, and reserved is often admired. The library functions as the center of social life. This reflects deeper cultural differences. Many Asian cultures, influenced by Confucianism, value quiet contemplation and listening over bold self-expression. There's a Japanese proverb, "The wind howls, but the mountain remains still." And from Laozi, "Those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know." This reverence for quietness connects to the concept of soft power, a term Professor Preston Nee uses to describe leadership, by water rather than by fire. Aggressive power beats you up, soft power wins you over. The ultimate wielder of soft power? Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi was, by his own account, a painfully shy man. He feared public speaking his entire life. But he came to see his shyness not as weakness, but as his shield and buckler. It forced him to restrain his thoughts and words, to listen, to be patient. His quiet persistence and refusal to engage in unnecessary battles allowed him to focus on his ultimate goal with unwavering resolve. In a gentle way, he said, "You can shake the world." This raises a crucial question. If you're an introvert, should you just accept your nature and live a life of quiet contemplation? What if your dreams require boldness, speaking up, leading? This is where Professor Brian Little's brilliant free trait theory comes in. Little, a classic introvert who also happens to be one of the world's most celebrated and dynamic university lecturers, argues that we're all born with certain fixed traits, but we can, and do, act out of character for what he calls core personal projects. A core personal project is work or a cause that's deeply meaningful to you, raising your children, advancing your career, fighting for a cause you believe in. When we act out of character for these projects, like an introvert giving a passionate speech, we're not being fake, we're being true to a deeper part of ourselves. Professor Little can be theatrical on stage because his core personal project is opening the minds of students he deeply cares about. The catch is, you can't act out of character forever. It's draining. Like a rubber band, you can stretch it, but eventually it needs to return to its natural state. This is why Little says we must create restorative niches in our lives, places you go or times you take to return to your true self. It could be a quiet walk after a loud meeting, closing your office door for an hour, or even, as Professor Little famously does, hiding in a bathroom stall between lectures to recharge. The final piece of the puzzle is communication. How can introverts and extroverts, the north and south of temperament, get along, especially in romantic relationships? Cain tells the story of Greg and Emily, a classic introvert-extrovert couple. Greg is a gregarious music promoter who wants to host dinner parties every Friday night. Emily is a quiet, thoughtful lawyer who dreads these gatherings and just wants peaceful evenings at home with him. Greg accuses Emily of being antisocial. Emily feels misunderstood and defective. Their conflict stems from fundamental misunderstanding. They're differently social. Emily craves intimacy, deep, one-on-one connection. Greg craves socializing. For an extrovert, this is about energy and social impact. They also have different conflict styles. Emily, like many introverts, avoids conflict. She lowers her voice and tries keeping things calm, which Greg perceives as withdrawal. Greg is a confrontive coper. He raises his voice to engage with the problem, which Emily perceives as aggression. Their solution was understanding and respecting each other's needs. They negotiated a free trade agreement, 2 dinner parties monthly instead of 4. They changed the party format to buffet style, allowing Emily to have the one-on-one conversations she enjoyed, while Greg could be at the center of action. This brings us to perhaps the most important question: how do we cultivate quiet ones? How do we ensure the next generation of introverted children grows up knowing their own strengths? Mark Twain once told a story about a man who searched the world for the greatest general who ever lived. He learned the general had died and gone to heaven. When he arrived there, St. Peter pointed to an ordinary-looking soul. "That's not the greatest general," the man protested. "He was only a cobbler on earth." St. Peter replied, "I know, but if he had been a general, he would have been the greatest of them all." How many quiet children, Cain asks, are like that cobbler? Their potential overlooked because they don't fit the mold. The key for parents and teachers is stopping the attempt to turn introverted kids into extroverts. Instead, we must help them thrive on their own terms. This means respecting their need for downtime after school. It means not labeling them shy, a label they'll internalize as negative. It means gently encouraging them to stretch beyond comfort zones, but at their own pace. If a child fears the ocean, you don't throw them in the waves. You play in the sand near the water's edge, then dip a toe, then a foot, until they learn to swim naturally. Most importantly, it means helping them discover their passions. For an introverted child, a deep interest in something, music, science, art, can be a profound source of confidence and a pathway to finding kindred spirits. True self-esteem comes from competence. When children find something they love and excel at, they build a resilient sense of self that can withstand outside pressures. Ultimately, Quiet's message is about balance. The world needs both introverts and extroverts. It needs both people of action and people of contemplation. It needs bold Franklin Roosevelts and conscientious Eleanor Roosevelts. It needs those who charge ahead and those who pause to look before leaping. Reading Susan Cain's Quiet feels like coming home for so many people. It's a powerful, reassuring, deeply validating book that gives you permission to be exactly who you are. The most profound lesson for me is this simple yet revolutionary idea. Our culture has it backward. We've made living as extroverts the only acceptable virtue, and in doing so, we've actively discouraged the inner journey. We've lost our center. The book is a call to find that center again. It challenges the very foundations of our modern world, from how we educate children to how we run businesses. It pushes us to question why we mistake assertiveness for competence and eloquence for wisdom. It reminds us that some of humanity's greatest ideas, art, and inventions came from quiet, cerebral people who knew how to tune into their inner worlds. In a world that can't stop talking, listening has become a quiet rebellion. Deep thought, a form of quiet revolution. The book isn't attacking extroverts. It's pleading for balance. It's a reminder that we need both people who thrive in spotlights and people who are more comfortable with lamplit desks. So what can you do with this knowledge? Starting today, here are a few simple ideas. First, Identify your own restorative niche. Where's the place, or what's the activity that allows you to return to your true self? Maybe it's a park walk, listening to music, or just 10 minutes of quiet in your room. Whatever it is, schedule it into your life, like any other important appointment. Second, next time you're in a group setting, whether it's a class discussion or family dinner, try a small experiment. If you're an introvert who normally stays quiet, challenge yourself to share one thoughtful idea. If you're an extrovert who normally dominates the conversation, challenge yourself to listen more and actively draw out the quietest person in the room. You might be surprised by what you discover. Finally, think of a quiet person in your life whom you admire, a friend, family member, colleague. Take a moment today to appreciate them for their unique strengths, their thoughtfulness, loyalty, quiet conviction. Let them know you see them. That was a summary of Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking, by Cain. We've touched on the major themes and stories today, but here's the truth. A summary is just a map. The real journey happens when you walk the path yourself. There's a certain magic in letting a book like this unfold at your own pace, when a story or single sentence connects with you in ways you never expected. This summary is meant to be a signpost, helping you decide if this is a journey worth taking. If anything we've discussed today sparked recognition or curiosity in you, I genuinely hope you'll pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about absorbing facts. It's an experience that can genuinely change how you see yourself and your place in this loud, beautiful world. Also, if you found this summary valuable and you're hungry for more wisdom from the world's most impactful books, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It lets me know we're on the right track and ensures you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book. Let's keep learning and growing together.